Welcome back to the Pilot Pro podcast, enabling doers like you to achieve your aviation dreams and become safe, confident pilots. On today's episode, we're joined by Karl Nero, a Chicago-based CRJ captain and line check airman for a regional airline. Karl's been flying for about 20 years and he's involved with some amazing organizations like the Organization for Black Aerospace Professionals, or OBAP. In this episode, he shares a lot of his experience working with OBAP and being involved with events to help young Black teens who are interested in aviation to see that it's really a possibility and encourage them. We're so glad to have Karl on the show, so let's jump into it. Hey Karl, thanks for coming on the Pilot Pro podcast. Appreciate you taking the time to be a guest on the show.
All right, thanks for having me, Justin.
For sure. So I understand that you are a CRJ captain based out of Chicago right now, but I want to kind of go back in time and get an idea of where you all started and all that. So going back to your childhood, was there any kind of aviation influence in your life that kind of got that spark started for you?
No, nothing direct that I can readily recall. Except maybe a few things. Like I had an uncle who's in the military, retired from the military. He was I don't know if he's a paratrooper. I can't remember the exact position, but he did jump out of good planes. Some of us call those folks crazy. But he used to jump out of planes for the military for a little bit. That might have been perhaps an indirect influence, but no pilots that I knew of or anything like that. Maybe additionally, one major airline who flies into Chicago Midway, I used to see their planes on approach kind of several miles out, coming in to land kind of over our backyard. But when you think of an airplane flying over top, they're flying over thousands of people's backyards, so everybody sees the plane in the sky. So I saw that, but then add to that, I guess, crazy dreams as a kid. So nobody that I knew that looked like me or otherwise was in the industries, but I think perhaps maybe some of those were part and parcel to me having crazy dreams to fly.
Okay. Was there a point that you can remember in your life where you said, like, you know what, aviation, becoming a pilot, that's what I want to do? When did that happen for you?
Probably somewhere junior, senior year in high school. It's kind of fuzzy now because that's 25 plus years ago now, but I'd probably say somewhere junior, senior year in high school. Still didn't know anything about it, didn't know anybody, until I literally got into it at the age of 17, going into college. It seemed cool. I had good grades. Why not? Let's try it out.
Why not? So how did you say you got started in about 17? What did that look like? How did you get into aviation?
Yeah, so it was part of the curriculum. So I went to University of Illinois down in Urbana-Champaign, who at the time they had an aviation program. It's since been morphed out of the 4-year institution, and I guess it's fully accredited at the community college down in central Illinois, nearby the campus. But it was the curriculum that I was a part of. It was a 2-year curriculum at the time. Then it they eventually had a 4-year option, which another guy and myself ended up being like the first graduates of that 4-year program. But so soon as freshman year started, hopped right into the airplane as on probably day two of class, and we had flight partners, and you split up the sessions, and that's literally the first time I got in a small airplane. Vacation maybe a few times over the years in airplanes growing up as a kid, but that was it. first time.
That's so cool. Was that program, was that after high school, or was that kind of an, uh, what's the word, kind of concurrent enrollment type thing while you were in high school?
No, that was after high school, so that was part of the
Okay.
4 year. That was part of the undergrad curriculum.
Okay, I understand. Gotcha. Well, that's cool. So you decided that's what you wanted to do, got into this program. Where did you go from there?
After finishing all their ratings through CFI, II, MEI, then was privileged to teach at the university for about 2 years. And interestingly enough, my first, is that right? Yeah, my first full semester as full time faculty was, during 9/11. So that August was, when I started full time. And so probably almost
Okay.
a month to the day from when classes started was when, 9/11 happened. So that was my first full semester of teaching. So that was, you know, exciting time, um,
Yeah.
to be doing that. So um, after that, I got married with my wife, who college sweetheart, and relocated back up here to Chicago area, where I'm from, where she's from, and started teaching at Part 61 Flight School. Um, kind of took a step back a little bit, because I was the junior man coming in and building multi hours. That was the thing back in the day. I had a bunch of total,
Yeah.
probably more total time than guys coming in now. I ended up having probably, a, I don't know, 2,200 total, but it was hard to get that 100 to 200 multi, which was what was kind of, 1,200 was kind of competitive. I couldn't get the multi, and so I taught there for a little while,
Yeah.
and then went to my first commuter airline, which is up here in the Chicago area. Before I got furloughed from that, and then I was rescued, if you will, in 2005 by the current region that I'm at.
That's good. I'm glad you found a good home to be at. It's interesting to see the cycles that the aviation industry has gone through. 9/11, the housing crash in 2008, and like how that's affected everybody's careers. I think we're pretty lucky in today's environment for new pilots that are getting into it that, yeah, you have to get the 1,500 hours, but once you get that, as of right now, at the time of recording this, uh, it's once you get those 1,500 hours, you've got a job from just about any regional that you could choose from. So it's a good time to get into it now. It's all about timing, really, huh?
Yeah, it is. It's funny you say that, actually. One of the questions that I often get is like, "Oh, you're at a regional. You know, I've been at this regional for 16 and a half years. That wasn't my original plan. Like you said, in '08, '07, '08, age 60, President Bush at the time signed age 65 retirement, boosting retirement age from 60 to 65. Had oil
Mm-hmm.
go sky high, as well as the recession, um, all in short order. I had every vehicle and every cog in the wheel churning, and I'm convinced I was going to be at one particular major. I mean, I was working all the angles and did the conferences and knew people. All three of those things happening at once changed stuff, and then had a couple more kids. Went back, got a master's, and had some other responsibilities, and kind of my world changed a little bit, which is fine. But I'm still happy I'm happy where I am now. But that wasn't the original plan. So sometimes things change.
Totally. That is, yeah, part of the industry. Like things change, the environment changes, your life changes, and plans change. So are you currently trying to move on to any kind of major airline, or are you pretty set on staying where you are?
I don't see it just yet, and I don't want to force the issue. If I could ever encourage newer pilots, sort of say, coming into the industry, you kind of have to do what works for you and your family situation. Um, Currently for us, I kind of got at 9% in my domicile. It's kind of um, I kind of got a nice quality life. Got
Yeah.
one kid will be a teenager in another year and a half, and so I'll have three teenagers in the house, and I kind of need to be at home. Just and having control over my schedule, making more money than I ever thought. Then my wife makes good money. We're not starving. You know, do I need to go make 50% more pay and then have some other stuff potentially suffer? It's like everybody's situation isn't so cookie cutter. So
Hmm.
um, yeah.
It's a definite trade-off. It's hard to give up that, in the top 9% in your domicile and trade it for maybe a little better pay, but also, like you said, a lot lower quality of life. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, it's not to say I won't ever.
Yeah, it's just a lot to consider for sure. So I understand recently you were part of a group of pilots that put together or were part of what's they called it the Aerospace Career Center Academy in Chicago. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a few different organizations take part in ACE academies, um, aviation career enrichment. You've had some other places use ACE also, but organizations like OBAP or the FAA and some other entities have these academies annually. Most of them last a week or 5 days. During a week full day program, and so I've been part of this one for. I meant to look it up, but probably going on close to 10 years. And so a buddy of mine, he asked me to be the assistant this year, and so we kind of have a template that we've been using, a successful template. Had to be modified a little bit due to the COVID era, and we weren't able to do it last year, but fortunately we were able to do one this year. And yeah, we get teens from our area. I'm in Chicago area, so we get teens from Chicago area to fill out the required paperwork. Everything's paperwork. Fill out the required paperwork, and we get them in there and uh, have them exposed to pilots that look like them. As a black pilot, we're only less than a little over 2%, depending on what metric you're looking at. Professional pilot population, 2% is low, and so if there's a good chance you may never, as a passenger, never see somebody that looks like me in the airport. Hopefully that number increases. I want to say women are 5%. I didn't research that, but it's
Yeah,
definitely
that's
single
that's
digits.
about right.
Um, yeah. So there's it's a 90, 85, 90% white male dominated profession. So part of our goal is to help help teenagers see themselves as doing something that maybe they didn't see themselves doing. So
Yeah, I know, and part of this is because I'm based in Salt Lake City, but I've flown with I think one woman pilot, and I've never flown with a black pilot. It's like I said, a very white male dominated industry, and I hope that as we're going forward, we continue to see more and more diversity in the flight deck. You mentioned OBAP. What does that stand for?
Sure, Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. So they were founded in the 70s, uh, based on kind of what we're talking about now. So big organization, very connected with the mission of exposing uh, more youth to uh, the whole entree um, of different careers. Not just, it used to be called Airline, Organization Black Airline Pilots, but they uh, changed the name a number of years ago to reflect a broader scope to encourage people in other industries, not other industries, but other professions within that industry, like mechanics, air traffic controllers. And I've literally met through organizations like OBAP and different conventions over the years, people in every profession within that field that I might not have otherwise have seen necessarily. So it's been great for networking and just an encouragement to see that you can do it like other people have done it.
So what kind of events or conventions does OBAP put on?
They normally have a spring meeting and a big general convention in the during the summer. Last month, in August, they just had their annual convention. It was all virtual this year, but normally it's in person, and it's a huge ordeal. And all the airlines are there. Anybody that's looking to hire people are there. And that's looking for a job are at those conventions as well. So, but besides those two kind of bigger meetings throughout the year, they've had different programs, and I've done pilots in the school talks, where go to schools and career days and things at different schools in Chicagoland, and present again, doing the same thing, letting people see in flesh and blood that there's black pilots. So.
Okay, so my understanding is OBAP is kind of the bigger organization, and then they put on these other events like the conventions and like the ACE Academy that you were a part of recently in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so a person going to ACE Academy, a teenager going to ACE Academy, what are the kind of typical things that they're doing as part of the ACE Academy?
One of the hallmarks, I would say, of how our Chicago Academy has been over the years has been a number of the field trips that we've had. So typically we'd have a field trip daily. So it's a Monday through Friday academy, but part of the day would be ground school, sort of say, where we cover stuff like aircraft nomenclature, aerodynamics, some STEM projects to see what lift actually looks like. Where I grew up with Legos, but one of the guys who designed one of the STEM activities, I guess he grew up on Connect. I don't know if I never used Connect. I think that's what it's called. But we'd make an airfoil and we'd test out, this airfoil and group the kids up into, 4 or 5 different groups and kind of have a little competition on who designs the most robust or most, the best airfoil that can carry the most weight. And so kind of in a progression, we build on some of the stuff done throughout the week, and then culminating on day 5 with an introductory flight. So some of them may have flown before, but It will culminate at one of the local airports out in the Chicago suburbs, where this organization we partnered with for the last number of years, where they do pre-flight, learn some stuff about the airport, and hop up in an airplane and see what it's really like in a little Cessna 172. But that was definitely the pinnacle of the week. But then other hallmarks of the week, I'd say, were the different field trips. Couple of different major airlines have hubs, and actually a few of them have big hubs in Chicago. So we've toured different offices and locations for a number of the major airlines, both in office workspace as well as at the airports, as well as done some military, Air National Guard outfits that we've toured, as well as some corporate aviation tours. So we've got a number of corporate outfits, and so we've done all of those, sometimes all of those in 1 week. So that was tapered down a little bit. I think we only had a couple field trips this year, but it used to be a week full of field trips, and got some exposure that most people may never have seen unless you're literally in all those sectors. So it was really cool.
Well, that's awesome. It sounds like just an amazing week for these kids to be able to experience the technical sciencey side of aerospace, and then a lot of the hands-on, like, let's go to the airport, let's check out these airplanes, and then even to do an intro flight. Like, how cool is that as a 15, 16-year-old? Like, that's just unreal. That's so cool that you were part of that.
Even younger, actually, our group this year was 13 to. We narrowed it a little bit, and only had 15 students due to just kind of COVID and the classroom space. We've lessened the amount of students that we've had, but in the past we've stretched it from 13 to 19. We've even had some 12-year-olds on a couple of years, depending on how many people registered and whatnot. But so even younger, 12 and 13-year-olds sometimes getting that kind of exposure that they may not have otherwise had.
Okay, so with ACE Academy, is that something that's only in Chicago, or are there other areas where these camps are, or I don't know if you'd call them camps, but other areas where these ACE Academy events and weeks are being held?
Yeah, we call them academies, and just due to the part of it is we aren't dropping, parents aren't dropping their kids off just for to have their kids away from the house for a week. It's like, no. Major money by investors or charitable organizations and different airlines go into funding the whole week. So yeah, so we call them academies. But other cities, I didn't check on the website, but I'd like to over a dozen, I'm pretty sure, but it might be close to a couple dozen. I feel like the number 20 stands out to me. Some of that, I guess I could have checked the website beforehand, but yeah, probably, there's a number of them in a lot of the large, the big cities. Or if you could think of any city that has a big major airline presence, they probably have an ACE Academy. And then sometimes, if it's not through the organization that I typically work with, in it might have something similar with other organizations.
So how does, if a kid and their parents are interested in this, where do they go to find more information about it?
Sure. Every year there's a enrollment. You can go onto the OBAP website and register. And so sometimes they can be competitive, and that's a little beyond my pay grade or volunteer grade on how it gets, you know, filtered out who is fortunate enough to attend the camp based on where where you sign up. Actually, we had a couple people from out of town uh, join our camp because, again, due to COVID, some places were shut down this year, and so, like I said, we were fortunate to have our camp this year, and so we had a few people that came from out of town to participate in our academy. So, but yeah, they register online though.
Okay, I'll include a link in the show notes below the episode with a link to the OBAP website so that people can find more information and register if they're interested. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on how that program works. I think it's so cool to be able to get young kids that are often in the minorities in aviation interested in aviation and get them just immersed in it. I kind of want to take a step back and talk more about your personal experience of becoming a pilot and what challenges you had through flight training and stuff. So I guess if you were to go back to your flight training just from a flight training perspective, trying to learn how to fly, was there one part of flight training in particular or anything that was a big challenge for you that you had to overcome?
Um, well, I had a couple hiccups along the way, and fortunately, I was glad I went to a Part 141 school when it was also good and for bad. It was also associated with the university setting, but um, my original aircraft that I learned in was a old beach. I'm not sure if any of the listeners here will ever see a beach sundowner. Um, Similar to a musketeer if you've ever seen those, but I didn't think it was really good training aircraft. Kind of not the oleo struts. It had like these disc bungee type uh, struts, and I struggled on soft field landings. And I think part of that was the airplane, but I don't know. I'm not, that's just from what I remember 20 plus years ago. But that was a little hiccup. It took me a little bit longer to kind of master that part. And so getting the private, it might have been some other things with my private. And then on instrument, arguably the two harder ratings starting off, getting your feet wet, getting some confidence. I had some other, college distractions, maybe partying and doing other stuff. And I probably didn't focus as much um, on some of the instrument training and just frankly being kind of rested on, coming in and doing some of the instrument flying. You start getting into partial panel stuff and just, if you don't have full night of sleep, some of that stuff can, with the time constraints in a campus semester like environment, I had a couple hiccups with private and then instrument, but after that it kind of went smooth sailing.
Yeah, I think along the way of becoming a pilot, I think we all reach a point, and it's for a lot of people, it's instrument rating, like you're saying, where we realize oh man, this is actually hard work. It's not all fun and games. And so I guess when you encountered those difficult challenges, what was it that got you through it, or how did you overcome those?
um I had a good support system, a good faith system at home, and I'm sure I had my parents. Not only were they paying money for me to go to school, but I'm sure they were praying real hard, as well as my grandmother. But so I'd say, my faith system, and as well as um, just seeing that other people struggled at times too, and the University of Illinois was I loved training there, even though I literally probably saw, let's see, when you can kind of you can tell the how few black pilots when you start counting them. Think of all the students. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what school you went to, but yeah, actually, the average person. You don't think of like, oh, how many white guys did I run across in flight school? But I'm like, oh, let me hold on, like give me 6 seconds, so I can count how many black people I ran across. It's just like less than two hands. So I'll just say that. But knowing that there was a couple of instructors ahead of me, and just generally speaking, just a good place to learn. Supportive system. I had a good support system behind me. Uh, Faith. I think all of those played a part in kind of getting through.
What is your family, like your parents and grandparents and such? What do they think of you being a pilot now?
Oh, I think they're used to it now, so I'm not impressed with it anymore. But no, no, I think they still like it. Everybody's
Yeah.
cool. And I'm half joking, but since I've been in it, and 20 plus years, it's kind of like that's just what he does. But no less, they're still plenty proud. I don't think you ever erase their pride. Maybe you just don't say it as much, but if I'm coming home after work or they see me in uniform, I think there's still a little twinkle in their eyes when they see that, or I don't know if you have kids at all, Justin, but you get to talking about your
Mhm.
kids at any age, and you're just like you don't understand it if you're single. Like, oh, they can't shut up. Start talking about the kids. Like, oh man, wait till you get kids, then you get to talking, and then you get
Yep.
grandkids, and you get to talking. So it's the same way.
I love that. That's so fun. Well, was there a particular experience or like that you can remember from flight training or maybe even after where you that really stuck out to you and made you go like, holy crap, like I'm a real pilot?
I think on a number of just the how our, I guess everyone has to do solo cross countries, but just on a number of solo cross countries where you're flying around on a nice VFR. Actually, we had IFR solo cross countries as part of the curriculum too, which with higher minimums. You had minimums, of
Yeah.
course, but um, I think just on probably every cross country, um, I'm sure I shocked some people out in Central Illinois or down in Kentucky or Tennessee, and when I hop out of airplane, it's like, hey, everybody. Uh, just I think just on a number of just cross countries where I've got the company or the school credit card for getting fuel, and it's like, wow, this is real deal. And not that I got treated any kind of way. I'm not trying to insinuate that at all. I think most FBOs were were cool. I never had any shady experiences that I noticed, but I think on pretty much every solo cross country it's just like, wow, this is crazy. They let me,
That's awesome.
17, 18-year-old at the time fly around you know, a airplane. What's wrong with these folks?
It's a pretty cool experience just realizing that like, wow, I am in command of this airplane and like so people trust me to do this. Like that is empowering, I think, as a young person, especially like as a teenager. And so I love that. What does, now that you're with a regional airline and you're fairly senior in your base, um, like what is your typical schedule look like?
So I'm also a uh, line check airman, so I've got some flexibility on that kind of stuff. So I'm all over the place. So I'll do anything from a local day trip to stand up all the way up to like a 3 day trip, generally speaking. So I had 3 line checks this week. I think I had 2 stand-ups and a line check last week. Next week I have some recurrent out in out west, and or a meeting, I guess technically. And so I haven't even flown this week. And next week I have a local after I get back from a day of company meetings with a deadhead on day one and a deadhead on day three. So it's nice to have some flexibility to get paid from the jump seat sometimes. So
Totally.
that's really nice.
That makes sense.
But so my schedule varies. Depending on type of line check, they may remove me from my flying schedule to do different types of observations from the jump seat. So I like those a lot. So it brings your block down, keeps your pay high. So it's
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that because as an airline pilot, for any of the listeners out there, you can only fly 100 hours a month as the pilot. But if you're in the jump seat, as Karl is, as a line check airman, just observing and basically checking other pilots off, that doesn't count towards your 100 hours of block time, but you're still getting paid for it. So definitely works out well that way. Being a pilot can be kind of difficult for a lot of families. You mentioned, I think, that you're married, you have kids. Like, how do you deal with the kind of abnormal schedule with your family life?
Well, I try to first take into account my family's needs slash events coming up for the upcoming month. Oh, today's the 10th, for instance. Like, somebody usually has to remind me that bids start today. Is like, today's the 10th. I need to start looking at stuff. So, so as I've gotten better over the years, I'll take a look at what's going on with different kids' activities. Due to COVID, my wife hasn't had to travel, but on occasion there's been some travel out of town for my wife's job, so I'll take that into account. I'm active at my church, so I'll take those things into account, and I try not to do weekends for probably obvious reasons. So I'll take all that into account and before bidding, and then I'll try to give my wife kind of the ultimate trump card, sort of say, on is this a bad trip, especially if I'm picking up overtime type trips. So I'll give her the final kind of trump card on that. Can I pick it up? She say no. Okay. I may beg and plead, but if she says no, then it's like, well, there it is. We'll be okay. So I think some of those kind of help. And just over the years, I've realized just having a frank discussion with my wife. We've been married 18 years, a little over 18 years now. I think it's easy for, I guess I'm talking to guys, but this could be ladies as well, but guys are kind of built a little differently, and have different drives. I'm speaking in generalities, so hopefully you don't get any hate mail for this, but I think guys tend to have a bent towards working and finding joy and whatnot, belonging, acceptance, whatever you want to term it, in their work, and taking pride in their work, as do women. But some of us, I have a workaholic gene. It's hereditary, and I need a check on it. So I know margin on paper, but sometimes in practice that can be challenging. So my wife holds that trump card. But I think also having a frank discussion like I had with my wife years ago and saying, hey, I don't want you to just say, hey, go to this airline, that's your dream. Go pick up this trip, that's what you want to do. I'm like, no, I want to know how you really feel about it. I don't want to go doing all this extra work and then you're mad because you got, you know, 3 kids in diapers and you're overloaded because you're working and you don't have friends in town. This is not us because we live local, but I'm sure you'll know some people. And if you ask around, I think it's easy for someone's spouse or partner to say, to just go along with our dream, sort of say, at the expense of your actual family. So I think having a real frank discussion and kind of respecting your family situation and not just try to race to get your 1,000 PICs so you can move on to the next job and go back to the bottom of senior. Just
Yes.
having those discussions at the right points.
Makes sense. It sounds a lot like what you're saying is, just being open with each other, and it sounds simple, but just placing, value on both people's wants and needs, and really, coming to a conclusion together on where you're headed and what the schedule is going to look like. So I like that. Is there a favorite airplane that maybe you have flown or maybe you haven't flown, something that you would just love to get into and do some flying in?
Now that's a hard question, Justin. I think they're all cool. So if I were to say on the GA side, my little running joke is that I want to buy a 6-place airplane. I just haven't. I need to stop buying houses first and moving and find a little extra money. But so I wouldn't mind something like a Saratoga or even like a Cherokee 6. So so that's something I would love to own personally. So I get my party of 5. I guess there's some bonanzas that might be 5 or 6 place too, but I was more of a Piper guy. So in my GA days, so that's why I did a lot of low wing Piper flying. So I like those, but all the heavies look cool. I'm at O'Hare, so anything bigger than my plane looks cool to fly. But yeah, any of the big Boeings or big Airbus. I mean, hey, truth be told, I'd fly any. Hey man, yeah, you want to give me a type? I'll go fly it. And I actually got a type in one of the Boeing products years ago. Just haven't used it. So
Yeah, really. Any airplane you're gonna put in front of me, I'll fly it for the most part, as long as it's airworthy and safe. Yeah, why not?
except maybe a shorts. Maybe a shorts. I wouldn't want to fly shorts. Those are ugly. You can edit that out if you want.
That was the other question. What's your least favorite? So answers that. Well, we'll kind of wrap up the podcast here, Karl. But I just have one other question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. So if you could go back in time to maybe the hardest part in your aviation journey, could be when you're learning to fly, could be at some point in your airline experience, just the hardest part, what advice would you give your past self?
That's an interesting one. I guess I probably gave myself this advice or sought it elsewhere. Is just that you know you can do it, even though you're the only one or two out of even though you're the half or 1% amongst your peers. There's a number that's also struggling, the same way you are, maybe worse. And if all of them can do it, you can too. So that's part of it. And then, don't be afraid to ask questions and seek help. As they say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And, you know, I'm glad I was able to, I think, do a lot of those things to, sometimes not get done by the deadline, since we were kind of semester based, done by the deadlines with different ratings. But I was able to get through all my ratings and not just squeak through, but, do well and, eventually even teach there. So, don't give up, ask for help and so on and so forth.
Well, to all the listeners out there, if you are interested in the organization of Black aerospace professionals, be sure to check that out. I'll include a link below in the show notes so you can go there and check it out and learn more about the events that they're putting on. Thank you, Karl, so much for coming on the show. I'm so appreciative of your time and all the amazing information that you've shared with us. So I'll keep in touch with you. Hopefully see you out in one of the airports and we can meet in person.
Thanks a lot, Justin.